Sugar is just empty calories, but it's actually worse than that. It's far worse. It's toxic and it's addictive. Hey, everybody, Dr. Mark Shankman back with you on the Obesity Project, episode 12. So today we're talking about the sweet poison, how sugar is destroying our health. And as you can see behind me, sugar is everywhere. And honestly, it's just killing us. And we've been told for years and years that sugar is just empty calories, but it's actually worse than that. It's far worse. It's toxic and it's addictive. So, with sugar comes the rise of obesity, diabetes, and metabolic disease, which is directly linked to skyrocketing sugar consumption. And sugar consumption really exploded in the late 70s, early 80s, and sugarcane fields and other sources of sugar, fabrication and agriculture has really changed the way that foods are processed, and everything now pretty much has extra sugar added to it. So sugar isn't just in desserts; it's actually hidden everywhere from bread to sauces to quote unquote healthy foods. So let's talk about sugar and what sugar really is. So sugar comes in many forms, but the most common forms are essentially three different forms are glucose, sucrose, and fructose. So we're going to talk about glucose first. Glucose is the body's main energy source, but if the glucose levels are too high, that creates a high blood sugar, which creates insulin resistance and fat storage. So glucose, although it's our main energy, can definitely be problematic in high levels. Now, sucrose, which is basically our table sugar and our added sugars, that sucrose molecule is actually 50% glucose and 50% fructose. So it's a glucose and a fructose molecule put together, and that's what creates sugar or table sugar, which is sucrose. So the sucrose is found in processed foods and super high in sweetened drinks, which we'll get into in a little bit. So fructose is the real villain here, the real bad player. And although fructose is found in fruit, which when it's consumed in excess, like in soda, it also wreaks havoc. Now, as I mentioned in previous videos, fructose in fruit comes along with fiber and some other items that actually slow down the fructose consumption and the glucose getting into the bloodstream. And as we'll talk about with fructose in a minute, the liver plays a key role in processing and managing that fructose. So the thing I wanted to definitely point out, and you get a sense of this with that picture behind me, it is super, super addictive and it's highly toxic. So studies have actually shown that sugar stimulates the same brain pathways as drugs like cocaine. And the more sugar you eat, the more you crave, and it actually hijacks your brain and hijacks your metabolism. So how does it create brain pathways like drugs, like cocaine? How does it, sort of stimulate these things? So sugar triggers a dopamine release, which makes it very hard to stop eating and hard to kind of sense when you're full. So sugar releases dopamine, just like drugs, just like alcohol, just like gambling, just like social media, and some other things create dopamine release, which is a highly addictive chemical. So let's talk about how sugars fuel obesity and diabetes. So sugar stimulates an insulin spike, which, as I mentioned before, puts us into a fat storage mode. If you want to burn fat, you cannot have high insulin levels. They're incompatible. So sugar stimulates the insulin stimulates fat storage. So sugar floods your bloodstream. The insulin then surges. And as I mentioned, the excess energy is stored as fat. Now, over time, high insulin levels also lead to insulin resistance. And as I've mentioned in the previous videos, insulin resistance then leads to even higher insulin levels. So it's an absolute vicious cycle. But that insulin resistance also sets you up for type 2 diabetes, which then ultimately leads to metabolic syndrome. And the more sugar we eat, the sicker we get. So let's talk a little bit more in detail on fructose, which really is the silent killer. So unlike glucose, fructose is processed only in the liver. So glucose can be utilized by almost every cell in the body. However, fructose can only be used and processed in the liver. So excess fructose then causes fatty liver disease, increased insulin resistance, and then high levels of triglycerides. So fructose consumption is linked to belly fat, to inflammation, and ultimately metabolic dysfunction. So this is why sugary drinks are absolutely so dangerous, and your body has no natural off switch for liquid sugar. And particularly when it comes to the fructose, as we mentioned, is only processed in the liver. This is why if you ate 5 apples, you never make it to the fifth apple because of all the fiber and the bulk that would slow your eating down, make you feel full. It would create satiation by stretching out the stomach and releasing hormones based on that stomach stretch. But with fructose, and particularly in sugary drinks, you could have 5 apples worth of sugar that are all been actually bred to be excess, have excess sugar in them. So you could have 5 uh, amounts of sugar in an apple, so 5 times the amount of sugar in one apple in one glass of apple juice. That took a lot a lot more to get out there, but you get what I'm saying, I hope. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about sugary drinks, which is the #1 sugar bomb. So the biggest source of sugar in modern diets is soda and sugary drinks. A single 20-ounce soda contains over 15 teaspoons of sugar, more than your absolute daily limit. And unlike solid foods, liquid sugar doesn't trigger fullness, like I mentioned with that apple. And so what happens? You keep consuming more and more and more. So sugary drink intake does equal a direct link to obesity and type 2 diabetes. So let's talk about soda consumption in this country and then also the rising obesity rates. So the more soda we drink, the absolute fatter we get. Obesity and diabetes increase in direct proportion to soda consumption. And the US soda consumption peaked in the early 2000s and then began to decline as awareness grew. But big soda, like big pharma, didn't stop. What they did was they just shifted market. So as the American market declined, soda companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all of them, they decided to move soda into new markets and thus started the soda global takeover, and particularly in Asia. So as soda sales declined in the US, Coca-Cola and Pepsi aggressively targeted Asia and other developing nations. And so what happened is they increased soda availability, which then exploded obesity and diabetes rates in those same countries that really hadn't suffered from obesity and diabetes prior. So now India and China are facing skyrocketing diabetes rates directly tied to westernized diets and the addition of those sugary drinks. So what is the result of this? It's a full-blown diabetic catastrophe. So Asia now has the fastest growing diabetes epidemic in history. And in some areas, type 2 diabetes now occurring and appearing in children as young as 8 years old, which was a condition that was absolutely unheard of in children prior. And if you didn't see my last video, which was on childhood obesity, please go check that out. It definitely goes into this in a little bit more detail. But So big soda profits while global health absolutely crumbles. So big soda, like big pharma, like big medicine, definitely not a great thing. They're more interested in the profit margin than in people's health. So this isn't just a health crisis, it's a metabolic disaster, which is fueled by a sugar addiction and by corporate greed. So how do we go about fixing this problem? So the first thing we have to do is we have to cut out all sugary drinks. So replace soda with water, with coffee or tea, which became coffee or tea or sparkling water. So cut out those sugary drinks. You don't need them. Water is the best thing that you could possibly drink for your body, for your health, and just get rid of those sugary drinks. So the next thing we can do is lower processed carbs. So we need to focus on those whole foods. We need to focus on protein and healthy fats and fiber. And then we need to read labels because unfortunately, sugar is hidden under many different aliases, under different names like high fructose corn syrup, cane sugar, dextrose, and many, many more. So we need to also think about embracing fasting and low carb diets or low carb eating, because fasting is actually the most effective way of lowering your insulin levels, reversing obesity, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes. Now, fasting is easy, it's cheap, and it does an amazing job of lowering those insulin levels while actually increasing your basal metabolic rate, which, as we mentioned in previous videos, when you cut calories, you decrease the calorie intake, your basal metabolic rate goes down to compensate. With fasting, it actually goes up, so you're burning more calories at rest. So we need to embrace fasting, which we'll talk about much more in future videos. And we need to embrace low carb diets. Now, the low carb diet, it doesn't really much, matter to me whether you're doing vegan or whether you're doing vegetarian or you're doing paleo or you're doing Atkins or you're doing keto or you're doing carnivore. All of the Mediterranean diet, all of these diets work, and they all work because they're low carbohydrate diets. So the bottom line in today's video is that sugar isn't just a treat, it's the driving force behind our global health crisis. And it's absolutely time to break free from sugar addiction and take back our health. So, have you struggled with cutting back sugar? What helped you the most? Feel free to drop a comment below. How hard was it for you to get rid of sugar? Did you suffer in any way? Did you develop headaches? Did you develop what people in keto world call keto flu? It is terribly addictive. You will go through withdrawal if you try to cut it out. So please put in the comments below the struggles that you've had cutting back or cutting out sugar. And then, of course, share this with someone that you know that drinks soda every single day, multiple cans a day, because they need to see this. They need to cut that sugar out. They need to get rid of those sugary, sweet sodas and drinks and get rid of the processed carbs and start moving in the right direction toward metabolic health. So thank you so much for watching. As always, I appreciate you. I appreciate the time that you gave me. Sorry, my face is a little dark. I shot this a little bit later and the lighting in here wasn't that great. But you get the picture. You understand what's going on now. And I'll catch you in the next video. Take care. Thanks so much.